Welcome everyone. It's wonderful to be here and have you join us for another webinar in our Lunch and Learn series. I'm really excited about today's topic. We're here to learn about investing in self-leadership, how to stop surviving and start thriving. Before I start, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we are all located today and acknowledge that we are hosting and recording this webinar from the lands of the Yugambeh people. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I'm Bridget French, the Senior Alumni Relations Manager in the Griffith Advancement team. Like all of you, I'm a proud Griffith alumnus. I completed my MBA here in 2020. In a few moments, I will introduce our fantastic guest speaker, Alumnus Mel Kettle, who is an expert in strategic communication and fully connected leadership. I'm so looking forward to hearing from Mel, as I'm sure you all are. It's really great to have so many people join us. This certainly was a popular topic. We have over 1,200 alumni registered. There are many other ways you can be involved with your Griffith Alumni Network. The Alumni to Alumni Mentoring Program is a great way to connect with other alumni around the world to share your skills and learn with each other. The program is exclusive to Griffith alumni and entirely online, so you can connect wherever you are in the world. Whether you're early in your career, considering a change, or have decades of experience, you can search for a match to provide advice and can also engage in discussion topics with other mentors. We have community groups to connect alumni in key locations like Melbourne and Sydney and all around the world in Singapore, Hong Kong, Canada, the UK, New York and other areas. So please follow us on social media to find out more. If you haven't explored the Griffith Alumni website in some time, I'd encourage you to take another look at our benefits and resources and see how you can get involved. You can also see this year's Outstanding Alumni Award winners that we announced back in June. Our overall university winners will be announced at the end of next week, which is really exciting, so keep an eye out for that. You might also like to think of someone you might like to nominate for next year. Now, if you're new to Teams Live, there are a few things to help make the most of it. You can ask questions in the Q&A panel on your screen. Please ask questions throughout the presentation and we'll share them with Mel to answer at the end. If you'd like to remain anonymous when asking your question, please tick the anonymous box. Mel will also ask some interactive questions along the way, so please reply in that Q&A panel and we'll publish those responses too. Again, if you'd like to remain anonymous, please tick that anonymous box. I'll also let you know that this session is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel. We'll email you in a few weeks when that's available. It's best if you subscribe to the channel to be notified immediately, and you can also see the other webinars on offer, particularly those that we recorded earlier this year. Now, let me introduce Griffith Alumnus Mel Kettle. At the heart of everything Mel does is a commitment to self-leadership. She has an overarching belief that we need to lead ourselves first before we can lead others. This mindset came after she survived the debilitating effects of work-related loneliness, stress and burnout in her late 20s and was reinforced when she had a life-threatening melanoma in her early 40s. Mel has honed her practice through degrees in tourism management and business marketing and a Griffith University Master of Public Health. Mel's the founder of the award-winning menopause blog Just As Juicy, host of the podcast This Connected Life, and was recognised in January this year as one of the top 200 biggest voices in leadership for 2022 by Leaders Hum. Mel was one of only 7 Australians on the list. With over 2 decades of experience in strategic communication and leadership, Mel is now an asset to leaders and teams that want to achieve real connection and sustained engagement. Mel recently self-published her second book, Fully Connected, for leaders who want to take back ownership of their life, reclaim their health and energise their workforce. So joining us from the gorgeous Sunshine Coast, I will now ask Mel to unmute her microphone and I'll hand over to Mel Kettle.
Thanks so much, Bridget, and thank you again, Griffith University, for inviting me. As Bridget mentioned, I am a very proud alumnus of Griffith Uni, doing my Master of Public Health. and finishing it in 2014, which can't quite believe it's been that many years, but there we are. Thank you also to all of you for giving up an hour of your time today to join into this webinar. Hopefully you'll go leave it with some ideas about how you can take more control over your life. So today I'm talking about self-leadership. Let's stop surviving and start thriving. This is not going to be an hour of only me talking. Well, actually, it probably will be because I can't hear any of your voices. But what I would like to encourage you to do is to type your comments into the Q&A as I come through, as I ask questions. It really helps me get a sense of what it is that is causing you concerns and issues, and it's also a really great way for us to learn from each other as well. Why me? Why am I talking about this? Well, as Bridget mentioned in my introduction, I have had a lot of times in my life where I certainly didn't prioritize my health or my life in any aspect. I was working in big jobs with big responsibilities and big budgets, and they were taking priority over everything else. So when I was in my late 20s, I had a really huge job, running events, traveling a lot, doing everything wrong in many ways when it came to my health. I was working about 75 hours a week, and all I had time to do when it came to food was order takeaway. I did find time to drink a lot of alcohol and a lot of caffeine, but I didn't have a lot of time for things like sleep and exercise and taking a break. So unsurprisingly, I went to the doctors one day having had chest pains continually for a couple of months, and he took my blood pressure and said to me, "I don't know how you're walking around still, because I've never seen someone your age with such high blood pressure." He said, "If you don't make some major changes in your life, you'll probably have a stroke before you turn 30. And my 30th birthday was 3 months away. So that was the wake-up call I needed, that I really needed to start prioritizing myself. And it was from that time that I realized that so many people don't take the time to look after themselves, or don't really even understand the importance of looking after themselves until it's almost too late. I'm so passionate about this that I've just released my new book called Fully Connected. And in the book, I talk about why it is so important and a little for us to prioritize ourselves and the benefits that we get from that. So I'm not going to talk too much about the book at the moment, but there will be, everything we talk about today is based in the book, and I'm really happy to talk more about that at the end in the Q&A if you have any questions. What I really want to know, though, is tell me about you. What's stopping you from putting yourself first? What's stopping you from prioritizing who you are and what you want out of life? This is the time where you get to type into the Q&A. I would really love to know, what are some of the things or some of the reasons that you might not be getting enough sleep or eating the right foods, or, you know, putting everything that is of value and important to you above what other people's priorities might be. So this is the time, type in the Q&A. There's so many things that are stopping us from leading ourselves first. Some of these might resonate with you. We have so many increased pressures with work and life. Life is just so crazy right now, and COVID has made that even crazier in some ways. For those of us who are also Gen X, a lot of us have got children that we need to be looking after. We've got aging parents that we need to be looking after. I was on the phone earlier today with a girlfriend who is a little bit younger than me. She's in her mid-40s, and she's got so many issues at the moment with her parents. So she's having to become a carer for her parents, a carer for her child, a loving wife for her husband, and she's got a really big corporate job. And she said something has to give, and it's really tricky to work out where the priorities lie. And I can see some of the comments that are now coming through in the chat where there's people who, like you're all saying, that reasons you're not always putting yourself first are because of family. You've got no time or energy to do so. You're not sure what you should be doing. You've got family obligations. You're a people pleaser. Yeah, my husband's a people pleaser, and that causes many issues at various times of our life, particularly when he says yes to work all the time, which means he's saying no to us. I won't go on too much about that, but I'm sure other people can relate. Sense of duty and accountability. Yeah, kids, single parenthood balanced with full-time work. All of these resonate with me. Social anxiety and anxiety in general. Yeah, that I feel your pain with that. Pressure the company puts on to deliver the complex project technically, and stress. Yeah. Lots of single parents, lots of expectations in workplaces, values not clear, busy being busy. Yeah, I can relate to that. And bad habits. Yeah. A few of the other reasons when I was researching my book that came out, as well as all of the things that you've all been commenting on, are things like we mistake self-care for selfishness. How many times have we said to somebody else, I can't do this for you because I'm just too exhausted, or I need a day off, or I need to get an early night tonight, or I'm overloaded with work and you've given me yet another project and I'm not sure how to slot it in. How often have you been open like that and showed that vulnerability, and somebody has said something that has made you feel less than? I certainly know years ago I had a job that suddenly became two jobs, and so there's only so many hours in the day, and I had two bosses with these two sets of responsibilities. And the first boss, who I'd been reporting to for a while, was fully on board with me having my job role changed and having more added into it. But when I said to him, I'm not going to be able to produce the volume of work that you are used to me doing, he said, yes, you can. And I said, no, there's just not enough hours in the day. And he said to me, don't be lazy, just do it. And so why would I be vulnerable with him again when he just belittled that? Other reasons that are, challenging us today and stopping us from putting ourselves first are imposter syndrome and not feeling worthy. I did an event the other day with a friend of mine who is absolutely amazing at everything that she does in life. And at the end of the call, she rang me and said, was that good enough? Like, are you for real? You were incredible. So imposter syndrome often also prevents us from putting ourselves first and prioritizing ourselves when we feel like we might not be good enough. And then, one of the things that I'm really passionate about talking about is loneliness. Loneliness at work, loneliness at home, loneliness in the community. Loneliness is this issue that has been creeping up and up and up as a major societal problem for, I reckon, about 15 years. And it's not only since COVID that people have been feeling more lonely. About a few years ago, Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was the chief, what was he? I always get his title mixed up. He was the Surgeon General of the United States when Barack Obama was president. He recently wrote this absolutely fantastic book called Together. And one of the things that he did when he first became the Surgeon General was he did a tour of the United States, and he started to learn about all of the health challenges and all of the health issues that people were feeling and experiencing around the United States. And he says in the book, there were a lot of things that didn't surprise me. People are concerned about increasing dementia, about increasing drug use in society, about cancers and heart disease and obesity. But he said the one thing that really surprised me, and it wasn't articulated very often, was everything had this underpinning theme of loneliness. He said, people are just so lonely today. And it's not only in community, but it's in the workplace. There's research that shows the majority of people in senior leadership positions, CEOs and C-suite and senior exec, feel lonely at work. And this leads to feelings of social isolation, increased anxiety, increased depression, and other mental health issues. And so what is it that we can be doing to help us feel less lonely? Loneliness also has massive impact on how we work. It has impacts on our self-confidence. It has impact on how we make decisions, on our ability to make decisions. It impacts us in so many ways. And so the more we can be looking after ourselves, the more hopefully that loneliness will start to decline. And one of the reasons I believe that is because when you feel good about yourself, you're far more likely to share those good feelings, knowingly or not, with the people who you work with. We need to remember that it's okay to not be okay, and we need to become less afraid of sharing our vulnerabilities and our feelings of needing help and support. And one of the ways that we can do that is putting ourselves first on our to-do list. So Michelle Obama, when she was First Lady, came out and said, I prioritise myself and I make self-care a priority, because if I don't, I am not going to be a very effective First Lady, and more importantly, I'm not going to be a very effective parent to my two children. And so what is it that you can do to put yourself higher on your own to-do list? I have post-it notes that all throughout my office with things I need to do. And I was looking at them yesterday when I was preparing for this presentation, and I saw this slide and I thought, the first things on my to-do list are write my newsletter, prepare for my book launch. This is an old list. Prepare for this presentation, and it had a whole bunch of work things, and it had a whole bunch of house administrative things. It didn't have go grocery shopping to buy vegetables. It didn't have spend time with my husband. It didn't have book in to go to a Pilates class. It was all so many things that were driven by other people's needs and requirements. And so let's have a think about what is it that we can be doing to put ourselves first more often. It's also really important to understand that when we put ourselves first, it's not only all about us, because when we put ourselves first, it's about understanding what our most important priorities are and managing them. How do we get an understanding of what our priorities are? I know my priorities are things like my health, my family, spending time with friends, having time to sit on the daybed with a gin and tonic or a cup of tea, depending on the time of day, and reading a novel. Think about what are your priorities and how can you prioritize them. There's so many benefits that come when we put ourselves first. This is the interactive bit again. I've got two questions for you. What are your priorities? And what are the benefits that you personally have when you focus on your priorities and put yourself first? So 2 questions. What are your priorities? And how do you feel? Or how do you think, or what do you do when you put yourself first? Some great comments coming through. And just to go back to the loneliness point, middle managers also feel lonely. Yeah. There's research from Beyond Blue that says 1 in 2 Australians feels lonely at least once a week. So there's often this perception that loneliness is older people who might be retired and living alone, but it's absolutely not. Loneliness is so many, it impacts everybody, whether we recognise it or are prepared to acknowledge it or not. Some great priorities. Yeah, priorities to get my teenagers through year 11 and 12. So many of my friends thought that once their kids became teenagers, parenting would become easier, and they were shocked to discover that it did not. Earning enough money to be independent and safe. Oh, I could give a TED talk on the importance of having a buffer account in your own name that you can access if you need to go somewhere to feel safe. Small business owner, others depend on me. Yeah. Same advice we get from airline staff. Yeah, exactly. Put your own face mask on in the event of emergency so you can help others. I like to equate it to we recharge our mobile phones every day so that the battery keeps going. We need to recharge our personal batteries, our physical battery, our emotional battery, and our mental battery. And we need to be doing something, along those lines every day as well. My priorities: art, health, reading a book. We could be twins. Yeah, health and family, benefits more balanced and happy. Absolutely. I feel happy to start each day with a walk and a bike ride. Yeah, I even did this with newborn triplets and writing my thesis. Were they all at the same time? Because I don't actually understand how you managed to get through all that at once. I'm guessing you had amazing support, which is what is so important, that we have this amazing support network. Priorities: exploring my potential, honouring my authenticity. Yeah, I love that. I get pummeled by angry family members. Yeah. We might chat about that. How do you put yourself first when there's resistance? It's a really big challenge. Some of the benefits from putting ourselves first is that we're happier because we are doing things that we love. We're healthier. That should be a bit of a no-brainer. And we're more human. And what I mean by we're more human is that we are more prepared and capable of showing up with authenticity and vulnerability and empathy. Because when you're feeling exhausted and run down and stressed, it's really difficult to feel, vulnerability and empathy, particularly for other people, because all you can focus on is what do I have to do next to get through the day. When we put ourselves first, where there's so many benefits in the workplace as well, we energize our co-workers. When you're happy and healthy and positive, that positive energy, flows out of you, and it energizes and it uplifts other people. Just the same as when you're exhausted and grumpy and short with people, that brings the energy down. We communicate with conviction. One of the things that I really believe about communicating with conviction is that leaders that communicate with conviction communicate with heart. They have empathy and they have kindness, and they demonstrate that through their words and their actions, and people are more willing to be influenced by you when you do those things. And then finally, we create cultures of belonging. And we create cultures of belonging because we have that sense of happiness and healthiness, and willingness to embrace differences. The other thing about putting ourselves first is when we have more energy, we're far more likely to cope when things go wrong. So when we feel good about ourselves, when we feel healthy, we're much more, we have much more resilience when things don't always go according to the plan. And there's not a lot that's gone according to a lot of plans in the last few years with COVID. And so the people I think who have gotten through it better are the people who have that higher level of energy. One of the things about creating cultures of belonging is that it helps to reduce those feelings of loneliness in the workplace. We also have some other benefits from having cultures of belonging, and that's things like less absenteeism, because people are healthier and mentally healthier and mentally more capable of being at work. We have fewer accidents on site. We have greater productivity. Fewer mistakes are made. And critically, for those of us in business, we have more profit. So there's so many compelling reasons that we need to be putting ourselves first. However, before we can think about thriving, we need to get out of survival mode. And one of the reasons that we don't put ourselves first is because we're just on this hamster wheel of busy. And busy, it makes it really difficult to feel that we have some way of regaining control back. So have a look at this, this image that's on the screen. And I'd really like to know, and you can type into the chat, you can use the anonymous button if you're more comfortable doing that, but I'd really like to know, where do you think you are on this? Are you at the bottom and just surviving, just hanging in there by, your fingernails? And when we're surviving, we're going through the motions. We are overwhelmed with life. I know when I've been in survival mode, and I've been in survival mode a few times in my life, I just feel deeply unhappy and that I'm reacting to everything and that I just don't have anything in me to move out of that survival mode. It just feels overwhelming. When you're in stuck mode, you feel like you're going in circles. You feel like you're unhappy, you're unsure, you're unfocused. You don't feel quite as grim as when you're surviving, but you don't feel great either. When we get into achieving mode, achieving is code for busy, as far as I'm concerned. You're busy doing things for other people. You're busy getting noticed, but at what cost? I found that the times in my life when I was in achieving mode, or when I was wanting to get a new job, and when I was just starting a new job. So I was trying to be really impress my superiors as much as possible, and I was doing everything they said when they said it. So I was just total yes girl, yes, 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 and putting myself last. When we're shining, we have good self-awareness, we have good levels of energy, and we're focused. We know what our priorities are, and we are working towards achieving them. We've got good goals, so we know what our goals are, and we're working towards achieving them. We're clear on our values, and not everything goes according to plan, but we're getting there. And then when we're thriving, we've got really clear boundaries. We're confident in who we are. We've got a high level of self-awareness. We've got exceptionally good self-care practices, and we are very confident that we're on the right track to achieving what we want to achieve out of life. So have a look at these. We've got a few comments coming in, a lot of people in stuck and survival mode, and I really feel your pain because I've been there a couple of times, and it's really hard. Lots of survivals. Shining, a recovered survivor. High five to you, because I'm sure you're not the only one here. Moment shifting between surviving, stuck, and achieving on a daily basis. Yeah. Full-time masters and full-time work. Oh, yep, I've been there. That's hard. Energy, but I'm stuck. Yep, achieving, surviving. For those of you who feel like you might be the only people who are in survival or stuck mode, I've shown this slide to a lot of groups, and there's very few people at the moment who are saying that they're thriving or shining. The vast majority of people I've shown this to have been surviving, stuck, or achieving. And I ran this webinar for a client of mine recently, and they were horrified because 90% of their staff that were on the call, who were in their leadership team, were admitted to feeling stuck or in survival mode. And they're an industry that has gone through a lot of turbulence in the last couple of years, and they're coming through it. But it was such a wake-up call to the CEO and the senior exec, because they didn't realise the full extent to which so many people were struggling. But the beauty of that is that they're now prepared to do things a little bit differently and to provide the support in a more granular way that their people are needing. So thank you for those of you who have shared. I really appreciate your honesty. I'm guessing you're now wanting to know, how do we get out of survival mode when we're stuck in it? There is hope, and it is possible to regain control. One of the things that I found the most helpful when I was deep in survival mode was having someone I could talk to. I'm sure you've heard the expression, a problem shared is a problem halved. And I cannot tell you how relieved I felt when I went to my doctor that day, over 20 years ago, and he said to me, you need to make some major life changes. My response to that was to cry for half an hour. I think I went through about 10 tissues and there was a lot of snot coming out of my nose, but he, to his credit, just let me sit there and he just listened. He gave me hope that I could move through this. And that made such a huge difference to me. And so if you're in survival mode or feeling really stuck, please find someone you can go and talk to, whether it's your doctor or whether it's some other health professional, or whether it's a trusted colleague, or if you work in an organisation that has an employee assistance program, make an appointment and go and speak to them. And I can absolutely guarantee that talking about it with someone who isn't going to with someone, particularly somebody who doesn't know you all that well, or someone who doesn't have a clear understanding of the situation you're in, will just help you feel that you've lifted some of that burden. They also might give you some good tools and tactics to help you move through it so that you can get from surviving to stuck to achieving. I think the other thing we need to think about is what is it that we can be doing to start prioritizing ourselves? Because when you start to put yourself first, you are well on the path of getting out of survival mode. There's 3 things that we can be doing when it comes to moving out of survival mode. The first is we need to become more self-aware. I feel that those of you who have said where you're at on the ladder already have a good level of self-awareness. I know when I was in survival mode, I did not have a good level of self-awareness. And I've worked really hard since then to increase that self-awareness. But when you have a level of self-awareness, you have a much greater understanding of who you are and what you stand for. You're clear on your values and you're clear on your priorities as they relate to your values. You're also clear on how people perceive you. And I think that's really important when we're in business today is how do people, because the way that people perceive you can impact on so many aspects of your life, not least whether you're going to get a promotion that you want or not. There's a few things that we can be doing to become more self-aware, and not all of these are easy. I will be very upfront with that. Becoming more self-aware can be a slightly painful process at times because we need to admit to some of our failings and our flaws. But rest assured, everybody has failings and flaws. You are not alone in that. One of the ways we can become more self-aware is to create space and time for self-reflection. Now, this looks different for everybody. You might be the kind of person who likes to journal, and so you can take some time out and journal your thoughts and feelings and then reflect on those. You might think about how can you practice mindfulness and really be in the moment, and when you're in that moment, be thinking about what is it that you want. Other ways that you might create time and space for reflection are to think back at the end of each day, or at the end of each week, or at the end of each month. What have I done? What have I done of value? Have I spent time doing things that are important to me, or have I just spent time doing things that are important to other people? Another way we can become self-aware or increase our self-awareness is to ask questions, to be more curious, and then to really listen to understand the answers. And sometimes this is asking yourself the hard questions. Why did I behave that way? Why did I respond in that way to this thing that happened? Why did I automatically assume when my boss said to me, let's have a meeting, that it was going to be bad? By being actively curious, we're asking questions of ourselves, but also of others. And curiosity is one of those things that I think often is not understood fully. There's so many ways we can be curious and we can learn in ways that make us more self-aware. So a couple of examples that are perhaps easier to do than others are to watch something on Netflix that you might not normally watch. One of the problems I have with streaming services like Stan and Netflix is that it just shows you shows to watch based on what you've watched in the past and liked in the past. So perhaps ask somebody who you know has completely different viewing habits to you, what did they watch? What did they watch last night? One of the questions I always ask when I run a meeting with people who might not know each other or with people who do is introduce yourself and let us know, what are you reading right now? Or what are you binge watching on Netflix or Stan or Amazon Prime? Because that can give ideas to other people to find different things that, and then when you watch something or you read something that's not your normal genre, it can create a sense of interest and awe and wonder. And they're three things that can increase our self-awareness. The second step to prioritizing yourself is to become self-motivated. When we are self-motivated, we know what motivates us and we take action to achieve our goals. Motivation is not going to sustain you, but taking action will. One of the examples I like to give is when I wrote my book. I was motivated to write it for a whole lot of different reasons, but being motivated to write it and actually getting that hard copy in my hand, two very different things. For anyone who has written a book, it's an extremely painful process. It's like a uni assignment on steroids. This took 3 years. I don't think I ever did a uni assignment that took me 3 years, and that's partly because I didn't do a PhD. But it was, I had to have a plan. And so if you want to really be motivated to achieve your goals and live the life you want, then sometimes you need to have a plan that you put in place. And then to implement that plan, you need to often create habits and routines. So when I was writing my book, I had a routine of every Monday and usually one other day a week. I'd go to my favorite cafe, I'd have a coffee, and I'd sit there and not leave until I'd written between 500 and 1,000 words on the bit that I had to do that day. And then the next part of that is tracking your progress. I had post-it notes and spreadsheets everywhere when I was writing this book. I knew how many words roughly it needed to be. I knew what sections had to be in each chapter, and I had a timeline of when I was going to write it. Now, not all went according to plan. It took me 3 years. It should have taken me 6 months to write this book. That's a whole other story. But I tracked my progress and I knew how far I had to go. I also had a book coach, and that made a big difference because I had someone to be accountable to who, admittedly, I paid a lot of money to. So I wasn't about to miss our coaching sessions because that would have just been a waste and I would have beaten myself up about that, which I didn't need to. But think about, if you are having big goals and big things you want to achieve, is there somebody who you can work with or talk to, or a friend or someone you can buddy up with so that you can have that accountability? It's a lot easier to be accountable to somebody else than it is to be accountable to yourself. And then finally, when it comes to being self-motivated, celebrate the successes, celebrate the wins, and don't just celebrate the big things. Like so often in life, we celebrate big things. You know, we celebrate 40th birthdays and 50th birthdays and 10th wedding anniversaries. Why don't we celebrate the 47th birthday or the 53rd birthday? And it's the same with life in general. What are some little things that you've achieved today that you can celebrate? You know, I said to one of my friends in the middle of COVID, I said, what's the best thing you've done today? And she said, I got up. She said, then she said, and I got up before 9 o'clock. She said, there's been a few days this week, I haven't managed to get out of bed before 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the only reason I did was because I was hungry. So she said, I'm absolutely celebrating the fact that I got up this morning and I cooked breakfast and I went for a walk. And so that, to a lot of people, is something that we do every day. But to her, that was momentous. And so she celebrated that. So think about what are the little things that you can be doing to celebrate successes every day. And then finally, we need to be prioritizing self-care. I love this quote on the screen by Paulo Coelho. When you say yes to others, make sure you're not saying yes to yourself. One of the things we so frequently say yes to others for is the speed with which we respond to emails. Emails are other people's priorities. So, that's just one little example. Self-care looks differently for everybody. What some people love when it comes to self-care, other people don't. So I've got quite a lot of friends whose idea of the perfect self-care weekend is bubble bath, champagne, and a massage. I'm not averse to any of those things, but that's not what I go to when it comes to that sort of self-care. But self-care is also deeper than that. Self-care is understanding your health, having a clear understanding of what your physical and emotional and mental health looks like. If you haven't been to the doctors in over a year for a checkup, make an appointment. You might say, I'm healthy, but how do you know that if you haven't had a doctor's appointment in over a year? There's so many things that can derail us, and health is right up there. The other thing we need to get right when it comes to prioritizing self-care are things like sleep and exercise and nutrition and moving enough and drinking the right things. So not having a fairly stable diet of coffee and alcohol. Put some water into the mix. Not just eating takeaway, but having fresh fruit and veggies, having a balanced diet. I'm not going to tell you what that looks like because for everybody it's different. But if you think that you need a bit of help with that, then again, speak to a healthcare professional, speak to a nutritionist or a dietitian and work out what's right for your body. One of the most important things when it comes to prioritizing self-care is having really clear boundaries. Know what you'll say yes to and know what you'll say no to. And I look at a boundary as being like a fence, at the cricket oval, for example, with a big fence around it. Sometimes you need to open the gate so that you can come in and out and you can, let those boundaries have a little bit of flexibility. But for the most part, have a really good sense of what your boundaries are and try to keep them in place. So an example of that for me is probably about 3 years ago, I decided that I needed to prioritize my sleep. I was deep in menopause. Those of you who are going through it will know what I mean when I say my sleep was an absolute disaster zone. One of the reasons it was a disaster zone was because I was staying up really late, watching way too much Netflix, getting up really early. Again, I was traveling a lot. I had way too many 6 a.m. flights, which meant I had to get out of bed at 3:30 to get to the airport in time, but I wasn't going to bed till midnight. So I decided one day something needs to give and I'm going to prioritize my sleep. So now it's very rare that I have a flight before 9 a.m. I've got one tomorrow at 8:30. That's just on the cusp. It's very rare that I have a meeting before 10, especially if I have to travel anywhere to get to it. And it's very rare that I don't go to bed at 10 o'clock. And so because I go to bed at 10 o'clock, sometimes I might read for half an hour, but the light's nearly always out by 11. And so then when I get up at 7:30, I've, given myself the best opportunity of getting a good 8 hours sleep. So that for me was the thing that had to change the most, because when I had a better sleep habit, then I would make better decisions around exercise and food because I wouldn't be tired. And so now I can get up in the mornings and go for a walk or do exercise rather than thinking I have to stay in bed because I haven't had enough sleep. I'm much more likely to go grocery shopping rather than call Uber Eats. And I'm going to take the time to cook a meal that I know my body will respond to a whole lot better than a takeaway meal. So think about what is it that you need to be doing to prioritize your self-care. The other two things, and again, I think these are both super important, is do things that give you joy. We don't have enough joy and happiness in the world. And so think about, what is it that you love to do? What are some of the things that that light you up, that bring you joy? Who are the people you need to be spending time with who make you feel happy and good about yourself? You're welcome to type in the chat who some of those people might be and what some of those things are that you do that give you joy. When I moved from Sydney to Brisbane about 20 years ago, someone said to me, I went from working 75 hours a week to 35 hours a week. And so I had 40 hours a week where I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anyone up here, apart from the people I worked with, and I couldn't ring them all the time. But I also didn't have any hobbies, because when you work 75 hours a week, there isn't a lot of opportunity to create a hobby or to find a hobby. And so somebody said to me, what do you love to do? And I went, don't know, can't remember. So, if that's you, think about, what did you love doing as a child? Because quite possibly you'll still love doing some of those things as an adult. So think about, what is it that you need to be doing to give you joy? I've talked about a lot in this half an hour, 40 minutes, and hopefully you're not overwhelmed with ideas. What I would like you to do is think of one thing. What's one thing that resonated with you that I've spoken about? What's one thing that you can start to do today to prioritize yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You're welcome to pop into the chat what the one thing might be for you. I see that somebody has said, time to get rid of my silly 6 a.m. flights. Yeah, they're the worst, aren't they? The worst. I love gardening and spending time with my chooks. Oh, I miss my chickens. I loved our chickens. My dad has dementia, such a joy in the little things. Yeah. Walk on the beach. Yes, that's my favourite thing to do. We moved from Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast last year because I wanted to walk on the beach every day. And I do it 5 times a week at least. It's the best thing ever. Camping, walking outside, gardening, beach walks, 30-minute me time before bed. Yep, that's super important. Boundaries. Yes, I'll put myself on the to-do list. I am important. Yes, you are. So what I would like you to do is write that down. Write the one thing down, put it in your diary, put it in your calendar so that you make sure you do it and don't forget. I know that it's really easy to forget things when we walk out of these sessions and get caught up in the day-to-day busyness of life. So write it down, put it on a post-it note, put it on your computer screen in front of you, put it in your calendar as a recurring thing to do every day, and then it'll eventually become a habit of something that you love doing all the time. If you're not sure what that one thing might be, and then think about either making a doctor's appointment if it's something that you haven't done for a long time, or do something every day that gives you joy. They're the 2 things that I recommend to people when they don't know where to start. Think of something you can do just for yourself that gives you joy. We're just about to open up for questions. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. But before we do that, I'd just like to make an offer for you. If you'd like to buy my book, or if you'd like to download the first chapter for free, or if you'd like to sign up for my weekly insights email that comes out, take a photo of the QR code. It will take you to a landing page on my website that will give you the discount code for my book and the first chapter for free if you're not sure, and you can have a look at it. So you're welcome to do that. My contact details are on the website as well. I'd love to know how you go with your one thing. You're always welcome to get in touch by email or by, I think my phone number's there as well. So thank you very much. And we've got some time for questions.
Thank you so much, Mel. That was a fantastic insight with so many wonderful tips on how to have clear boundaries and prioritise self-care. I think this is just so important. We've had a couple of years that have been hard with lots of challenges, and I think some of us have really lost sight of how to be self-aware and be self-motivated. So for me personally, I'm going to make that doctor's appointment. I'm also going to watch something I've never watched before on Netflix, and I'm really looking forward to that. We do have time for some questions. I'll just remind everyone that if any questions we don't get to, we can do a follow-up session with Mel, and she's very kindly agreed to do another session that we will record with her. So if we don't get to everyone, don't worry. But Mel, a question that came in some time ago, sort of halfway through your presentation, was from Anonymous. I'm self-aware and becoming more so, but I don't have the clarity you mentioned. Why would this be?
That's a tricky one. I don't know is the simple answer. I think that, and I'm not sure what you mean by the clarity. So if you could maybe just put a bit more information around what clarity is it that you're after? Is it the clarity around what your values are, what your priorities are, or is it clarity around something else? And I think that if it's clarity around, values or purpose in life, they can be really hard to work out, and they're not easy to find. There's a model called Ikigai, Ikigai, I think, which looks at things that you love, things that you're good at, things that you can make money from, and things that make you happy. And then if you, have a look at that model and do a little exercise around that, which if you Google it, you'll come up with some examples. It will really, it might help you just get a better sense of what's important to you and what you value. Hopefully that helps. You're welcome to reach out to me, and we can have a chat about it if you like, if that's easier.
Thanks, Mel. Next question. How do you have any control over how people perceive you?
There's a few things in life you can control, and one of the things you can never control is what other people think, feel, say, and do about you and towards you. So you are never going to be able to control how people perceive you, but what you do have control over is how you act and how you behave and how you think and how you feel. And so there's always going to be really judgy people, and there's always going to be really negative people. Your power is to brush that aside. Some of that comes with age. I certainly know when I turned 40, my care factor for what other people thought of me went from being moderately high to almost non-existent, almost overnight. And then when I turned 50, it sunk even lower. So I try really hard to only associate with people who I know love me and value who I am and what I bring to the world. And so maybe try that. If there's people who you think aren't perceiving you in the way that you want to be perceived, then maybe you need to look at what are you doing for them to have those feelings, particularly if it's a lot of people perceiving you in a way that you don't want to be perceived, or are you just associating with the wrong people?
Great advice. Great advice. The next question, and we've had a few questions around this. How do you say no to new projects that are continually put onto your workload by superiors? And this could relate to many other aspects of our life. How do you say no and establish those clear boundaries?
Saying no is really difficult, particularly if you have to say no at work and you don't have a solid, trusted relationship with the person who is giving you the work. One of the ways I say no is I don't have capacity right now. Or if it's at work, then I will say things like, I'm really happy to take on this extra project, but as you are aware, I'm also doing this and this and this. What would you like me to stop doing so I can do this one? Like, what's the most important priority from your perspective, and put that decision making back on the person who is increasing your workload.
Yep. We've had a question. Anonymous has asked, who are your 3 top inspirational people?
Oh, it changes all the time. I absolutely love Sarah Blakely. She founded Spanx, and I just think she is incredible as a human, incredible as a parent, and incredible as a business owner. I follow her on Instagram, and she makes me laugh every time I see one of her posts. And I also follow her husband, who I knew nothing about, but he is incredible as well. So they're two. And who else? Oh, I'm really inspired by people who do things that they don't need to do and who demonstrate their leadership qualities when people aren't watching them. So, you know, people who just see a gap or who see something's missing and step into the breach to solve a problem, whether it's a really big problem or a really small problem.
Yep. And Mel, probably we only have time for one last question. How do you overcome imposter syndrome? So any tips you have, and that will be our last question. For any questions we haven't gotten to, again, we'll keep a note of those and we'll do a follow-up session with Mel.
Yep, definitely. How do you overcome imposter syndrome? So many years ago, I went to an event that Wendy McCarthy was speaking at. And Wendy McCarthy is quite a well-known Australian businesswoman. And at the time, a couple of the things that she had achieved were she was the first chair of the ABC board when it changed its corporate structure. She started up, I think, a Planned Parenting organisation in New South Wales, and she's done a lot of other amazing things. I heard her speak about 20 years ago, and somebody asked her about imposter syndrome. And she said, when I was asked to be the chair of the board of the ABC, my first thought was, why on earth would you ask me? I have nothing to offer. And at that point, she had a long list of things that she had to offer and a long list of accomplishments that she'd made in life. And she thought about it and said to the person who asked her, she said, I wanted to say no, but the word yes came out of my mouth. And then I said to him, I don't know what I have to offer. And he said, I don't know why you doubt yourself. I believe in you. We all believe in you. Why aren't you believing in you? And so that's a question that I now ask myself when I feel like I'm, not good enough or less than, I think, why am I not believing in myself? Why am I not believing in my accomplishments? One of the practical things I've done to help overcome imposter syndrome is I have what I call a love file. And a love file is made up of all the emails that people have sent me over the years, whether it's clients or employers or friends, that basically tell me how amazing I am. And then I also have a hard copy file with cards and with notes and with, physical things that I've been given over the years where people are telling me how amazing I am. So that has gone a long way to helping me understand the value that I bring and kicking that imposter syndrome in the guts and getting rid of it. So maybe try one of those things. See if, create a little love file and talk to people about what you do bring to the world. Because imposter syndrome, man, it's brutal.
What a great idea. I'm going to start that for myself, I think.
Yeah, I love my love file. I look at it all the time. It's very self-validating.
Yes. Mel, thank you so much. We will need to wrap up very shortly. I feel so empowered after that. I can't believe how much we explored in such a short time. Some great takeaways. Like I said, we had over 1,200 alumni register, so no wonder we were overwhelmed with questions. We weren't able to cover it all. We will answer those in a future conversation. I hope all of you now have a few actionable items to implement in your work or personal life to reclaim ownership and find some joy, just that one thing. I'm going to walk my dog at least 3 times a week. That's what I'm going to do.
I'm sure your dog will love that as well.
I think she will. We'll send a follow-up email in a few days asking for your feedback on this session to everyone. It's a great opportunity to submit ideas for future events like these. We really value your feedback. And a reminder that this webinar was recorded. So we will email you out the link to this recording in a few weeks' time so you can watch again, share with your friends and catch anything you missed. The next webinar in this series will be in November, a brand new topic with another Griffith alumnus. So please keep your eye out and we'll be sending you an invitation to that shortly. Last month's webinar was on Web 3.0 for Business with Josh Murchie, and that's already available on our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe, you can check that one out. That's Griffith University Alumni in Giving. There's also a link on the alumni website to get there. So again, a huge thank you to Mel Kettle for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And thank you to everyone attending online. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Bridget. And just before we sign off, if you would like to stay in touch, you can do that through my website, melkettle.com, through the QR code and the link to that will be in the email that goes out afterwards. And I'm also really happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on Instagram. And you'll just find me by searching for Mel Kettle. I have a very unique name, which is definitely an advantage in times like this.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Thank
afternoon.
you.